Okay, hello everybody. It is time for me to be loud again. If everybody can take their seats, I hate to break up all this fabulous discussion, but it is time to get started again. So we have Kate's stealing things. So we have our second plenary session. This is another panel. And in this case, our session is called Practical Advice for Eclipse Planners. Who are the stakeholders and what are their primary needs? So there's going to be a little bit of overlap from before, but hopefully we're addressing a few different issues than last time. Now, before we get into this session, remember this is a hybrid conference. So we have people both online and in the room. For the online participants, if you have questions, please use the chat as your mode of sending questions. That way our lovely helpers can read out those questions. If you are in the room, please do not speak until you get the microphone. We are at least attempting to record this, although we did not record the first session.
I have the unfortunate news that unfortunately we didn't check one of the Zoom settings. The first session wasn't recorded, but we will be sharing slides and notes afterwards. So if anyone has any additional notes or things that they want to bring up, you will have the opportunity, and all sessions moving forward should be good now. You know, better we get caught this now than day two.
But that means that it's really important that if you have a question that you wait for the microphone, in part because it's just good practice. There will be people, sorry, I'm too loud again. There will be people in the room that need the microphone to hear you, but the people online definitely need the microphone to hear you. So I just want to have that as our MO going forward. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have 3 plus me. I'm just general trouble causer. We have Kate Russo. Some of you would have been fortunate enough to see her give a public talk last night. Kate has come all the way from Australia, and she has been chasing eclipses for over 20 years and has been helping to plan them for more than a decade. And so has lots of very practical advice. You already heard a little from Trish this morning, but again, her experiences in 2017 are going to be invaluable. And then we have Matt, whose second name I am not going to pronounce. And he's from the Ohio Emergency Management Agency. And although Ohio didn't see the 2017 eclipse, they have been way ahead of the curve on doing planning for the next eclipse. So we're going to hear from Matt as to what they're doing, and I will just try to fill in any gaps in between. So I'm going to hand it off to Kate and let her talk about what she does.
Hello. So I'm looking for my slides at the bottom there somewhere.
Oh, that one. This.
That one.
I'll get you in 2 seconds.
Okay, so a little bit about me. I've been involved in eclipse planning for 10 years now. And I'm the author of the white paper on community eclipse planning. So what I do is after each eclipse and even before each eclipse, I gather some information, do interviews with people, so we can actually capture some of the lessons learned. And then I put this into the white papers, so that then is used for next eclipses to be able to guide the process of planning. So hopefully all of you are aware that the white paper on community eclipse planning exists. And anyone who doesn't know about it, oh, that's brilliant. Okay. And it's free. It's a free resource for everybody. And one of the challenges is to see my slides.
Yes. 1 second.
I'm going to skip over a lot of what I was going to talk about to keep it brief. Okay.
There you are.
Great. I'm going to skip over those slides. Okay, so I'm going to create a little bit of a stakeholder map. So the session is about who the stakeholders are and what their needs are. So I outlined this in my white paper about who the groups that you may need to be involved in your areas. And this, you notice that I've called it a draft stakeholder map. It is definitely a work in progress. It's not to say that there is one way of thinking about who your stakeholders are. What I've learned over the years is that there's no one way. We can't actually say, here's a manual that will apply to everybody. What we do know is that every community will approach it differently, but there are some commonalities. And really it comes about, you need people who represent the visitor perspectives. You need people who represent the local planning on the ground. You need planning, people involved who are part of the wider logistics, like national and state level. And then also people involved in education.
Point it towards me.
It's you. Here we go. No. Okay. It's really busy and I actually can't see it from here. That's a bit of a problem. All right. So, and I'm not going to talk through the whole slide, but basically the important thing is, oh, Michelle, thank you. Michelle's amazing at problem solving.
Yay.
Oh no. Thank you. But basically, there's all these organizations that are involved in your stakeholder planning. And it kind of looks a little bit like Dan's diagram this morning. So you know how he said it was really hard to visualize and he had so many more bubbles. But what we do know is that these are the typical people who are involved. And every community is different. So what I find is that there are some communities who actually, it's the tourism groups who take the lead in Eclipse planning. And there are other communities where it's the Chamber of Commerce that takes the leader in Eclipse planning. Others, again, it's the government, the municipal and county services that take the lead. Sometimes it's the state and national or federal government that takes the lead, the state, and we'll be hearing about Ohio soon. Sometimes it's those in the with subject matter experts. So those who have science centers, astronomers, they take the lead. And it really very much depends upon people on the ground. And so what you'll find is that it's very much driven by who's passionate, who's the one who actually recognizes that this is going to be a big thing. And they seem to be driving the process. And Rochester is a really good example because the task force is being driven by Deb and Dan, and they're outside of these government agencies. Yeah. And in some ways, that seems to be an exceptional approach. And I've come across this before in different communities, because if it relies solely on government processes, I mean, let's face it, sometimes decisions take a long time, right? And if you're outside of that, you can actually bypass a lot of those processes and you can get things going, get things working and get people involved on a more passionate level. And so sometimes it takes someone who's outside of that process to take the lead. And in my white paper, I talk about who's in charge, because the eclipse is going to happen regardless of whether you plan for it or not, right? The universe is just taking care of that. You don't need to worry about that. You've got 50 million other things that you need to plan and worry about. But you do need to prepare for the impact. And sometimes the focus seems to be only on risk or logistics or safety. Or sometimes the focus is just on the tourists. And so I think that's what I've tried to create in my white paper about putting the community at the heart of all planning. And this is especially the case in smaller communities, because often smaller communities do not have the resources like larger town centres do. And so you don't have multiple people sitting on each of these stakeholder groups to be able to represent, to be able to move forward with what's being planned. Often you're taking on multiple roles and you're finding yourself having to educate, putting together materials, consider all sorts of things that you haven't really done before. And it's really tough and very isolating. And that's my core message about Eclipse planning is if you center it all around your community, it's the community that benefits. And it's the community that then will feel supported in the process. Because when it's happening at government level, sometimes you'll find that there is miscommunication or feelings that the community isn't really part of the process of it. But it's you know, the path of totality, the moon's shadow is going to visit your community, and that's the thing to be celebrated. Now, the other thing that's unique about the eclipses in the US is that, you know, in 2017, but also in 2023 with the annular and 2024 with the total. And it's not just the US, it actually covers Mexico, the US, Canada. We're also preparing for an eclipse in Australia. So people are forgetting that, but it's actually, you know, next April. So there are other people who are planning for eclipses. I've forgotten what I was saying. So there's a number of people preparing for eclipses. I've lost my point there. I'm really sorry. I think it was important.
US,
Say again.
something unique to the US.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. So something unique to the US is that there are thousands of communities preparing for the eclipse. That differs to the eclipses that I've been involved in and my early ones in for my earlier versions of the white paper. So when I first started advising about what to do and helping communities prepare, I was basing that on the guidance and experiences of the 2012 total eclipse, which was in Australia. And I think I've got the maps, or I might have taken them out, I can't recall. Okay. But that was quite rural, and that was my home region. And the path of totality just went through a couple of communities. And so community preparing happened at really local level, very different to the 2017 experience where you've got thousands of, 1,000 communities preparing across the whole path. And so, you know, you're in competition with each other, but you're also in competition for the same resources. Struggling with the same issues.
It really doesn't matter. I don't have anybody there ahead of you or coming in behind you. So your arrival and departure time just.
So yeah, it's very different
It's
process.
good for you.
And then the other thing was 2015, I was involved in the Faroe Islands, and I was very much able to take a community approach. It's a very remote island
just
community
from any open spot
around Iceland and Greenland.
I
It's
should
really
only have
remote.
one other vehicle down there unless somebody calls today.
Again,
and it's
very
another,
straightforward
reservation.
community preparing,
you're good.
because I had access to the ministers. You know, everybody was there. We're working in the same offices, and it was really straightforward to coordinate. And I think we did a beautiful job by putting the community at the heart of it. It is so much more challenging in these situations with the US eclipses, which will also affect Mexico and Canada as well, when there are so many communities preparing. And so what I would say is that I see you, I see all your communities out there. And I know a lot of people actually do email me to say, look, all these things are being planned, but what do we actually do? How do we actually, you know, how do we move forward as a community? So that's what we're here for. You know, people are around, and I do encourage you to try and link in with the task force that are set up. If it's not just within your town, it'll be within your region, county, state, but that's what they're there for. And if you can't find anyone that's like that, look to people like the group in Rochester, because they've got some amazing resources and they really are helping other communities, and they're miles ahead, and they've just done a great job because they haven't been held up with a lot of the bureaucratic struggles that some of us face. So in my white paper, my second white paper, I think, you know, the key messages were assemble your team. So that really is about getting all the stakeholders involved. Develop your strategy. And that really is about, you know, when I said putting the community at the heart of it, it's the community trying to identify what messages, how can we leverage the eclipse for a greater benefit? And then the third is boldly go where no one has gone before. And with that strategy, this is what communities really need to think about. So don't wait for a larger task force to sort things out and tell you what to do. It's really important that you take ownership of this. and come together and really think about what your strategy is going to be. So it's about trying to figure out how are you unique and different? And it's about embracing those differences that you have, celebrating those differences, and really highlighting them, because this is your opportunity. And you want to differentiate your group or your community from everyone else across the path of totality. So those are some of the questions that will help you do this. And then the second issue is about branding. So how do you want to be known? And again, the Eclipse is a really good opportunity to be able to do that. The world's spotlight is going to be on you. And, you know, you didn't ask for this, but actually it is an opportunity. So why not embrace it? Have an opportunity to rethink about your tourism or the way you do things as a group, and, you know, give yourselves an opportunity to dream really high and think, how would you like things to be? And how can we use this eclipse to be able to get there? And then the legacy. So what is your desired eclipse legacy? So some communities have done some really amazing things by creating a whole lot of new tourist opportunities, new programs, new resources. The eclipse is the focal point, but actually it's part of a longer term strategy. And when I work with communities, I always like to read their documents about, you know, their strategic plans, because that really helps you. You take the eclipse out of it and you figure out where are they wanting to go, where do they need to go, and then you align how they're planning part of that process. And that's what makes it a very strong community approach. And the communities that do that actually benefit quite a lot, and it brings people together, and it's just so rewarding to be able to walk the path with different communities across Australia. Well, not Australia, where am I? I'm also planning in Australia as well. So
yeah.
I have multiple hats on multiple countries. So it's a bit tricky, isn't it? Yeah. This is a map from Michael Zieler, and it lists all the cities across the path of totality. But we know that there are over 3,000 of you out there preparing for this eclipse, and not every one of you are going to be in this little spotlight here. But we see you, we hear you, we want to support you. And the key resource, everything, I've tried to put everything that you need in the white paper as a first point of support. So it should have all the information that you need to get started. And I did that because people were really struggling with trying to find, you know, us chasers know how to find all the information. It's all out there. But where do you start when you haven't seen an eclipse, where you're the person who feels under pressure?
Museum and Science Center visitor, just letting you know that our cafe will be open till 2 o'clock today. We're serving delicious hot pizza from Mark's Pizzeria, subs, salads, and ice cream. So find that all located on the lower level of the museum. Again, the cafe will be open till 2 o'clock today.
I don't know if those watching on Zoom heard that, but there's ice cream. That's what I heard. I think there's other stuff as well. I heard ice cream. So that's a resource. It's got a lot of information in, really useful. It's free, and share it around.
Thank you.
As I remarked during opening remarks, yes, we will hear those announcements every now and then. The system is building wide.
Will we hear a countdown to the eclipse or minute system?
Not today.
Hopefully tomorrow.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So you're a community planner and you're wondering who exactly are my stakeholders. I found out that when I was planning, that was everyone. I basically had 3 buckets I could put everyone in. We would all hope that the fullest buckets are going to be your education and your inspiration, but it really takes all three to make a great plan come together. So in my education bucket were like my teachers, schools, libraries, astronomy organizations. I also included any science-based research teams and high altitude balloon teams coming in for the eclipse, because I had a lot of education that needed to be done, and I needed all of these people doing different things for me to reach that goal. Inspiration were those that were just naturally curious and excited about the eclipse. Just wanted to be a part of what was going on. These folks would be organizations, Chamber of Commerce, newspapers, church groups, and your volunteers. And then of course you had the money bucket. This included anybody that I had sponsorships, monetary donations, or in-kind contributions. This bucket also held my city and county departments, such as the police, fire, sanitation, health, and transportation. So we planned a 4-day weekend festival, Monday through Friday, and it was all things science, and we named it Solar Fest. Depending on the experience that you want to create for your community will determine your need for stakeholders. So as a planner, these are the 2 things you need to secure: your eclipse glasses and porta potties. Potential stakeholders for your glasses could be anyone in the eye care field, optometrists, ophthalmologists, anyone selling eyewear. I chose to reach out to my local hospital. They were more than happy to be my sponsor. I then sold my glasses for $2 a pair. I took that revenue, turned it back into more things that I could do during my festival. And of course, buy porta potties, because nobody wants to advertise on porta potties unless you're in the business, I guess. Once we had those 2 major needs taken care of, the rest was just pairing up good, really cool activities with businesses in our community. So here are some of our examples. So TG Missouri is a local Toyota car plant sponsored. They sponsored our Mud Festival. So TG is very environmental friendly. So we were able to teach both kids and adults the importance of keeping the earth clean while we all got dirty. Except for that kid in the middle. I swear he's the only one that did not get dirty. And then another industry sponsored our Chalk Art Festival, where artists of all ages and skill levels created scenes of science. We wanted a mobile planetarium, so I approached a local real estate company. When you're selling real estate, it's all about location, location, location. So they sponsored a star party all about locations of the stars and the constellations in our southeast Missouri skies. So what these folks could do is they could actually go back home, they could go in their own backyards, and they could pick out the stars and the constellations and learn something from that event. We had all ages come to this, from kids to grandparents, and I sold out of all 5 shows. I probably could have done another 5. We had a local business that held 5K races in our community. He wanted to get involved. So we worked it out with our city, created a route, and we created our Solar Fest Glow Run Walk. And we had hundreds that participated in that. Now here's a really great example. I had an insurance guy, he come to me, he said, Trish, I have nothing sciencey about my business, but I really want to be involved. But what Tom didn't realize is that his company offered grants for community events. So we had Tom fill out a grant. He was able to purchase 2 library telescopes for our 2 libraries and also some astronomy books. And now we get to hold star parties, and that is something that is continuing on even past the eclipse. Let's see. So to get stakeholders involved, use the science behind their businesses. every one of my stakeholders had a connection with whatever they were sponsoring. And if I were to give you the top 5 tips for planning, they would be: create a task force. You cannot do this by yourself. You need others and use them. Treat everyone as a stakeholder. Science is everywhere, so give them a stage. They are very proud to tell you what science-based is in their business. So solar glasses are the first thing you order early. And then top 10 Eclipse words. So we didn't talk about this too much, but don't get caught not knowing what you're talking about. Be familiar with common things like the Bailey's beads, diamond ring, shadow bands, and know the difference between a total, partial, and lunar eclipse, because the media may not. If someone asks you how long is your totality or what totality is, have an answer for them. And then make it all about science. My community totally geeked out and they can't wait for 2024. So that's all.
Wow.
While he's doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and say thanks for having us. My name is Matt Jaksetic with Ohio EMA, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing from the state level planning efforts. So as you see, we've got a total of 9 counties that are going to be within the path of totality. 26, through the shades there, and then 20, and then 33 that are going to be outside. So we have a majority of our 88 counties that are going to be in some way, shape, or form within the path of totality. So what is Ohio doing? We've already formed our state level eclipse planning task force. We've developed state plans where the agencies are also developing their agency plans for this event. Also preparing an emergency operation plan for the eclipse specifically. I want to emphasize that this is an event. It's not an incident. So people hear incident, they're thinking something bad is going to happen. So let's look at it from an event standpoint. This is a very well planned event. We know it's coming. This is one of those advantages that we have, and we've got years to plan for it. So why not do it? And so we're also going to be developing exercises to test those plans that we have in place. We've prepared local planning guidance documents and links to information for folks at the county level, local level that might be interested in what we are doing to the state and how we can work with them so that we have a good event. And then we also have our state eclipse website. And the way we have that set up is if you were to Google 2024 Ohio eclipse, it should be the first thing that comes up. So typically, like we all know, we always click the top link. And so that'll give you a lot of good information that we have on hand. So who are our stakeholders? You see, we've got a whole list of them, but I'll only name a few. ODOT, our Ohio Department of Transportation, they are a main partner, and as we all know, when people leave, they're going to hit the roads, and so we need to account for that. The Ohio Library Council, good wealth and source of information that we get. COTS is our Central Ohio Trauma System. So we keep our hospitals informed and let them plan for what they need to plan for with the influx of population that's going to be coming to Ohio. Another one that I want to highlight is our OP3. That's our Ohio Private-Public Partnerships. That one, as we've learned through the pandemic, the importance and value that agency has, or that organization has, is invaluable. Working with our retailers, hotels are going to be a major thing to consider as we plan for this, as well as your local stores. So if anybody goes to their Kroger or their local grocery store, in a normal day-to-day situation, you may not have the things that you want from your store. So imagine if you've got more people and more population coming into your area, they're going to have to plan for that as well. So let's keep our retailers in the loop of what we're doing and what they can expect from this eclipse. So of our task force, we've got 6 subcommittees: communications and operations, health and safety, transportation, viewing, lodging and local support, resources, logistics and education. So looking at this timeline, I know it's very busy, but we started planning for this in 2021, and we've kind of laid out a map of how we want to do things. So right now we are meeting with our subcommittees every other month. Once we get into February, we're going to have our tabletop exercise. We're going to start testing those plans, and as we test those plans, we're going to find and identify gaps and close those gaps. And so once we get to our January 2024, that's where we're going to start our staging and deployment of needed resources, and kind of work on where we need to have people placed based off of what we have going on in Ohio. So things that we should plan for: local Eclipse festivals with viewing parties. Arrive early, stay late. That's the motto that we're following. That seems to be pretty good across the board. Simple. Population surge. Traffic management, especially the egress support. We know we can anticipate from previous eclipses that people will trickle in, and then as soon as that sun starts coming out, they're going to boogie. So let's be prepared for that. Local infrastructure stresses. Local operational support between public works, law enforcement, supply, sanitation, and then also communications. If anybody goes to a sporting event, let's call it Buffalo Bills, for example, if you try to make a phone call out of that stadium, what are the chances that you'll get that phone call out? So if you've got a population surge coming in, influx, you might see that the cell phone towers might be overloaded and won't be able to get those out. Also, health, safety, and welfare. Most importantly, don't wait. Start planning now. Consider your budgeting needs. Most budgets are starting to be planned for 23 and 24 already for the fiscal year. What are your staffing levels going to be? If you're in a larger city with a hospital trauma system, level 1 trauma center, for example, do you have the adequate staffing that you'll need for that? Supply needs, touched on porta potties, that's a big one. And then other supplies that you might have. We've sent out a needs assessment to our county EMA partners to kind of get an idea of what they might need from communications, logistics, other things that they may not be in big supply of. And then consider your high risk populations. So if you've got folks that need dialysis on Monday, what's that going to look like if they cannot get to and from their appointment? Just some small things to consider, but don't wait. Contact information. Here's mine. Also, I'll give kudos to Colin Campbell. Colin is the actual lead planner for Ohio EMA when it comes to 2024 Eclipse planning efforts. But he is happily in Iceland right now, enjoying some much needed vacation time. I do also want to note the importance of using your GIS folks. Linda Slater is our GIS wizard, and she has developed a very good amount of mapping that is on the Eclipse website. So I encourage everyone to take a look at that and use that as an example of what can be done and the things you can consider and have up on a map. But thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to keep this real short. You've already heard a lot from these three. As Trish said, your stakeholders are everyone. And sometimes it's unexpected where those directions come from. I successfully got a beer named after me in 2017. So, but seriously, it's we've heard about, well, you need your emergency management people and you need your tourism people and you need everybody. And sometimes you don't know where that help is going to come from. And events, sorry, I'm just being too loud. It's a problem. Sometimes you don't know where that's going to come from. So those stakeholders might be local businesses who can do things that you don't expect, and not just with money, but with things like doing informational events, things like breweries, vineyards, those sorts of things. So don't ignore areas where you think, oh, they have nothing to do with eclipses. If they have an outdoor space, they're useful people to know. Likewise with, how do you pull people in that you might not have expected? One of the things that I did a lot of in 2017 was talking to service clubs. I mean, Rotary, Kiwanis, Cosmopolitan, Lions, all those sorts of organizations. And I did a lot of them. And once you've done one, people hear about it and like, oh, you should come and talk to our club. But these are groups of people who cover a large range of businesses, of opportunities. So I ended up having already been the local astro expert for the local TV stations because, it's Missouri. I did all of the press for anything astro long before the eclipse, but doing a Rotary Club meant that it was one of the people high up on not just the local station, but a chain of stations all along the path that led to some really interesting collaborations. So I think if, the stakeholders aren't necessarily just the people who have money or can inspire, it's absolutely everybody in your community. And some of them will do some really interesting things. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. Okay, do we have a microphone?
We have 3 questions that were asked in the chat regarding the top 10 eclipse words. Is that a list somewhere that people can access the top 10 eclipse words?
Totality.
I actually have one I can share.
All right, we will share a list.
So yeah,
So fantastic. Okay. So the answer is we will get that list for you. All right, next question. For those who got volunteers, did anyone utilize volunteer agencies? And
We're such a small community. No, I did not. But we did utilize volunteers, so you'll know who those are in your community.
so certainly, in my experience, it was once people know that you're planning stuff or that you're even vaguely involved, they're like, oh, can I help? There are a lot of people who will come and help.
And can I just say, it takes a lot of time and effort to coordinate volunteers. It's really hard to do on top of your eclipse coordinating that you do. So if you can outsource that to some group that already manages volunteers. So it's thinking creatively about using the resources that you have and then building the capacity from there.
there was one more question. Did your municipal jurisdiction have a line item budget to begin planning efforts?
So my city and my county graciously gave me $10,000 to plan a 4-day event. And I can tell you $7,000 of that went to porta potties.
Wow.
So I really kind of thought of it like a jigsaw puzzle, and everything that we've done, these groups had already done. We have a Mayfest festival. So, our chamber did the solar festival. My guy that done the 5K race, he knows how to do that. He has his team. We just asked him to do another one. Now, these organizations also got to keep the proceeds, so they were working for their charitable organizations as well. I had churches that reached out and said, hey, we do breakfasts, we do dinners, let us do one of those so people could come and have a home cooked meal. So they will come and find you if they think that they can provide something for your puzzle.
So there was a question, the lady on the front. Over here.
Thank you. I have a question for Matt. So you had a state level task force. Do you know if you had community task forces as well, or like county task force? And if you did, Oju, how are you connecting the two, or are they operating independently?
So Colin has been doing a lot of outreach work and going to counties to talk to county EMA directors, county commissioners, to make them aware of what's coming, and it's a good idea to start planning for it. I'm not aware of at the county level if the counties have established task forces or not. I would believe they might be at least in the process of starting that. And so that's pretty much where we're at with that. From a standpoint of working with them, we will support the counties as much as we can. In a sense of if they have needs, then we will support those needs.
Hopping around the room, make my way around. Oh, and feel free to introduce yourself so that the people online can know who they're talking to or hearing from.
Hi, I'm Catherine from Pendixie Fossil Park. It's kind of a two-part question. Have you experienced any organizations or entities you're going to for collaboration that have pushed back or haven't bought in as quickly as you'd hoped? And if so, what was your reaction? How did you get them on your side?
Yes.
Yes.
Anyone, not anyone.
Okay, so when we're talking about stakeholders, you know, I took on basically the state of Missouri. And so my stakeholders was everything from teeny little towns to the entire state. And it varied hugely as to what buy-in you'd get. You'd have some people, when I arrived at the University of Missouri in 2002, 15 years ahead of time, the local amateurs were already, are you ready for this? They already had t-shirts. At the same time, you know, the University of Missouri, I was getting lots and lots of press about it, but it was just me. And I didn't get buy-in from them until less than a year out. And so, you know, it varied hugely. And it was really a matter of just keep on pushing and making sure that you are being seen by as many different people as possible. Because sometimes, like the Rotary Club, the president of the university will hear about it, or this other community will hear about it. And a lot of it is building up that network. So a lot of it for me was just making sure I got in front of as many people as I possibly could. The State Emergency Management Agency invited me down at some point, and even in there, it was a huge mix of reactions from people that were, you know, something like, oh, this is going to be huge and awesome, to this is terrifying, to what's the big deal? And that was after being invited. So it's a bit of a lottery, and it's just a matter of keeping going and showing that enthusiasm. I think the showing the enthusiasm makes a big difference. Now, the thing I will say that I think is going to be different this time, and I think that Trish hinted at this in the first session, we might have had lack of buy-in because prior to 2017, the last solar eclipse on the lower 48 had been almost 40 years before, and it had only been in a tiny portion of the US. And so there wasn't any memory of it. There wasn't any, there weren't people who already knew what to do, and there weren't numbers. We were having to guess at what was going to happen. Now we've got data from different communities, and we can say, you know, this is why you need to be ready. So I think I'm getting less pushback now, but then the pandemic kind of slowed things down.
So I think it's very hard when you're working with people and you know it's a big deal. You absolutely know you need to start planning early, but you can't get anyone else involved. It's really hard and challenging. Or else if you started to work with people and you give them the education and give them the support, they understand, and then they move on and all that's gone. So it can be really frustrating, and you just have to keep going and going and going. And often it's about communication, isn't it? You know, if we can filter the information down, if we can share. And I'm a big believer that sharing the passion, sharing the excitement of totality is the way of getting in, because otherwise people just assume it's like a, you know, a super moon or you know, one of the things we hear all the time, look outside, and the social media really exaggerates things. And then everyone just goes, well, what's that all about? So sometimes there's confusion that the Eclipse is going to be something similar to that. And it is a big deal. It really is a big deal. And we have to just keep communicating and trying to convince people. And setting up communication systems as well. So allowing that information to filter down, all the work that you guys are doing top level has to be filtered down so that people on the ground can experience it, can know about it.
Was this on the same topic?
Yeah. Just, you.
No.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Kate reminded me of one of the most common misconceptions that we deal with, and that is if you've seen 90% of clips, you've seen the whole thing.
ridiculous, yeah.
So I can promise you. Oh, you saw it.
No, that's a good
17,
point.
huh?
No, 99.9 is not, you know,
Yeah.
unless you
I
see
can-
totality, you see nothing.
I can promise you in the videos that Fist Planetarium's making NASA sponsored and distributing for free, we address the most common two most common misconceptions in my whole career are, gee, I saw most of the show, I saw 90% of clips, and can I use my sunglasses? So we will address both those.
To tack on what Shay was saying is trying to get buy-in from local communities, even the state agencies. You have to use numbers. So use those numbers to your advantage, because that's how commissioners see things. And so if you use the numbers, so for the state of Ohio, we are within 70% of the United States population within driving distance. 70% of the United States could drive to Ohio in a day. So we have to consider that. Looking at other things like, the path in which it's going across Ohio is going to be in rural communities, mostly rural communities. So if you look at, volunteerism as a whole, your rural communities have a hard time getting volunteers. I think Trish just touched on that. But if you look from a standpoint of first responders, your volunteer fire departments, which are already on the decline, they also account for 70% of Ohio fire departments. So getting them from work to the firehouse to the call is the time frame of response is going to be increased because of the potential influx of population coming in and the traffic that you're going to have. So if you could at least talk to them and bring it to, this will affect your citizens within your community. Now we need to start planning for it. So are we going to put our firefighters, our volunteer firefighters at the firehouse so that they can stage during the event and then after? But also getting those volunteer firefighters, employers on board with, okay, we need to let, these folks have this day off so that they can hang out at the firehouse for the potential for emergency. And it goes back to, the fine line of, we're planning this as an event, but there are going to be emergencies that occur as a result of this event. So.
And just before the next question, there are some good resources out there for those numbers. So the drive shed map that we saw earlier, that's where there was a version of it in 2017 that basically told you, this is the proportion of people within the path, close to the path. Those things will be available through our website, through other websites. So you've got those at your fingertips to take out to the people you need to get on board.
And can I just have one final comment about buy-in? After the Eclipse in 2017, I visited a number of communities and I interviewed people like Trish and anyone who was involved in Eclipse planning. So some of these communities, I was able to speak to the mayor as well. The biggest single most factor that I felt that influenced how communities embraced the Eclipse was having that leader position excited about it. So when the mayor was involved and gave a very positive message to everyone in the community that this is going to be a big deal and that we really want to embrace it as an opportunity, it really came through very strongly. So if there's one way that you can do to try and, if we can reach out at that level, and we've been talking about it in the task force to see how we can do that.
Right back here.
Loretta Whiteside's Yuri's name. I was curious if anyone's had experience like reaching out to hospitals, encouraging them to delay elective surgeries, not schedule them that day, going to businesses, telling them not to schedule meetings during that afternoon, or maybe let their employees just not come in because they're going to be at the school function with their kids, or Oh, bank tellers, like we're gonna be in 32,000 people, or it's just gonna go right over their head, but if they're a bank teller and they can't walk outside at 1:30, they're gonna miss it. So can we work, are we working with business, can we work, have you had experience working with businesses about like how we can schedule around it so everyone can experience it? So we.
Absolutely. So that's where our OP3 comes into play, where we have our public-private partnerships and have them to talk with their with the retailers, banks, things like that. But with the understanding that we can't tell them how to run their business. It goes back to the education. This is what we could possibly be seeing. 4 minutes of totality is pretty cool. I would go ahead and encourage people, maybe within that time frame, one, I'm just using the bank, for example, one teller go out, come back in, another one go out, come back in. Again, this is just all, this is a work in progress,
I find working with that example, the Chamber of Commerce are brilliant. So I often do workshops with the Chamber of Commerce and the businesses come in and we talk about those practical logistic issues. Absolutely close your business during totality. And often, you hear these discussions about 15 minutes before, because nobody who's in the community is going to be lining up, going into a bank and withdrawing money during the eclipse. That's not going to happen. So let's everyone just enjoy it for what it is. And, the Chamber of Commerce really are great for all those practical solutions on the ground in communities. So that's how you work with those issues.
So for Perry County, we did talk about those, and I do believe that our hospital did put some surgeries on the back burner. We also talked about, if grandma needs her medication on that Monday, maybe go ahead and get that prescription filled, a few days prior. You never know what the traffic's going to be and stuff. So we did have several businesses that either closed or they allowed their people to go out and experience.
We have some questions on the
okay.
line. First one is, do you find it helpful to have one main event planner leading all of the task forces, or keeping everyone on track? For which I will say, for Rochester, it is so nice having 2 of us so that we can be in multiple places at once, and that we have this core group that can even go out. As we were prepping yesterday, we had someone else go out from the Genesee Transportation Council to give a presentation, because the rest of us were here preparing. So I will say, not just one person's great, multiple is wonderful.
And that's fantastic to hear that not every place is as resourced as you guys are in Rochester, or have that passion or forward planning like you have been doing. Of course, it's helpful to
Just your friendly reminder that the cafe on the lower level is open. We're serving delicious hot pizza from Mark's Pizzeria, subs, salads, and ice cream. It's located on the lower level of the museum. Again, the cafe will be open till 2 o'clock today. Thank you.
You're good.
So for Perry County, in 2017, we had an Eclipse task force of over 50 people, and they were experts in their fields or their organizations. We did have a core team that started out in the very beginning, and it was myself for tourism. It was our city administrator, our economic developer, and also our director of the Chamber of Commerce. So one of them, controlled like money, and we just had kind of fingers going all through our community that we could reach out to people.
And you might be aware in 2017, there were a couple of communities that were very, very high profile. So these included Casper in Wyoming, and also Hopkinsville in Kentucky.
Carbondale.
And Carbondale, of course. But the Casper and Hopkinsville, they actually got a separate event planner, event coordinator to come on in, and they were tasked with planning and preparing and coordinating the Eclipse efforts. And they stood out because they were identified along the path of totality as really very high interest areas. And they knew years in advance that they were going to be you know, inundated with people because of their position along the path of totality. And they did that really well. It paid off enormously, and you know, it speaks for itself because you can Google any of those two areas in particular and see everything that they were able to achieve. But most communities actually can't afford to do that, or they just don't have the resources all the time. And so often you find that it's a person who's doing their own individual job as well as taking this event coordination on. So if you can do it with someone else, that actually makes it enjoyable. Actually, it's really fun to do it with someone else. But yeah, it all comes down to resources, doesn't it?
To do one last virtual comment, I will point out, if we don't get to all the questions for those here in person, we are just about at lunch. So I highly recommend talking to our panelists, talking with your other attendees, because I know not everyone online can ask those questions, but we have plenty of breaks throughout the day where you can talk with each other and talk with our panelists. So our last question will be, when a community is on the path of totality, what percentage of visitors will be eclipse chasers on an organized tour versus how many are just semi-local folks who see this as a great chance to see an eclipse for the first time or perhaps an only time?
So I think that is going to depend on the location. So for instance, you know, there will be eclipse chasers coming from all over the world to the US. The chances of them coming to Rochester are pretty slim. But because on average, the cloud cover gets worse as you go north and east along the path. So within the US, it is South Texas that will be the most popular, simply because that's where the cloud cover is going to be lowest. So, you know, answering that question really depends on where you are on the path. For the real eclipse chasers, the people who will be devastated if they don't get to see totality. I'm looking at you. And me, frankly. Whereas you're going to have other people that, you know, they're looking at places to go, and it's going to be, you know, do they have a reason to go to that place in particular? And this is where, you know, being out ahead, Rochester already has a reputation out there for, oh, this is going to be a cool place to go. So it's going to vary hugely depending on, you know, I think at this end of the path, you're going to have a lot less of the eclipse chasers and a lot less of the planned tours for exactly the same reason. If you're spending several $1,000s on going on an organized tour, you want to go where the chances are best. But you're still going to get a lot of people simply because up at this end of the path, you have a lot of population really close by.
Wouldn't you say though, no matter where you are,
Wait,
overwhelming, sorry. Wouldn't you say that no matter where you are, the overwhelming high percentage of the crowd are new? You know, so you should be prepared not for the really knowledgeable people who've been planning for years, but for the thousands of people who decided Tuesday or Friday last week, oh, I'm going there on Monday.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we already heard with there's 32 million people on the path, and there's another several hundred million that it's not that long a drive. And so you're going to have a lot of people who they might have seen a partial in 2017. They may have seen a partial during the annular eclipse next year, but the chances are they won't have seen this before. And so they will need guidance. So be ready for it.
And I talk about this in my white paper, who's coming. And the biggest, for most communities, the biggest group of people you're planning for are people in your community. And then it's the people who are connected to people in your community who then invite themselves over. And you know, your houses kind of then are filled up with, you know, second cousins twice removed, and anyone wants to be there. That's the biggest proportion of those who are going to be you're planning for. Then it's going to be those who are living out, you know, within the drivable distance of that. So the eclipse chasers, I think they're the unique ones that are only focused, more primarily focused along the weather, places where the weather is going to be better, Mexico and Texas. So if you're in those two areas, it's more of an unknown and you will have very high numbers. other areas along the path, focus on those areas that I just mentioned.
So for Perry County, we had, I said earlier, we had 10,000 people roughly come to Perry County. Of that 10,000 people, 36 states and 17 countries were represented. And the most overwhelming comment that they gave us is because you guys seemed to know what you were doing. You had a plan and you publicized it. So, you know, get a plan.
And be in the crossroads.
I think another important thing to consider is, you know, for the state of Ohio, our state parks, you can start reserving 1 year out. So if we could look at those numbers, keep track of those reservations and, you know, what the fluctuation might be, then you could have somewhat of a gauge of what kind of population you'll have or influx you might have. Also consider talking to your local hotel, see, you know, what the reservations are looking like. That way you can at least have some kind of a gauge of a number of how many people might be coming in based off the reservations made.
Cool, and with that, I think we'll close up our second plenary for the day. A huge round of applause for our. And we will be back at 1 p.m. We do have lunch right back here. You don't have to go to the basement to grab pizza and ice cream. It does sound good. If you want ice cream, you can go down, but we do have food right in the back, and I've been told that sodas and waters, more water will be on its way. Thank you.
We're gonna get in line.